back to what my partner was saying about if there was a direct popular election. If there was a direct popular election, then it is possible that many minor parties would form to inevitably change the outcome of what the popular majority is needed to obtain the presidency. So if there's So if there's too many parties that form after the two major parties, which would be like the any minor ones that would form around them, then they can, in a way, change how the outcome would turn out. So that brings me to a quote from Dave Lutz, the Electoral College, states that for in a direct popular election, there would be every incentive for a multitude of minor parties to form in an attempt to prevent whatever popular majority might be necessary to elect the president. The surviving candidates would thus be drawn to the regionalist or extreme views represented by these parties in hopes of winning a runoff election. So it could really change how our country's ran because there's so many different viewpoints that are going on. And then also, my opponent stated that the larger states are not favored and the smaller states are. And while it is true that the smaller states are sometimes overrepresented, the same can be said for the U.S. Senate, which brings me to another quote from the Electoral College Pros and Cons. States that the Electoral College overrepresents rural populations, and the United States Senate, with 2 seats per state, regardless of its population, overrepresents rural populations far more dramatically. But since there have been no serious proposals to abolish the U.S. Senate on these grounds, why should such an argument be used to abolish the lesser case of the Electoral College? And then also by using a direct popular election, the unfortunate event that someone's using fraud, it's harder to catch as well, and also to fix this if it happens. And then that is what happened in the election of 2000 when there was a little mishap in between the votes. So they did have to do a recount. So it would be a lot harder to have to recount the votes of every citizen in the United States that voted, other than just the state. And then this brings me to a quote from Tom Lansford, the author of the Presidential Election Process. And it states that the National Popular Vote Plan becomes an invitation to corruption, voter fraud, hard enough to prove and to remedy when done with the boundaries of any one state, becomes almost impossible to check under the plan. So just going back to restate, although it seems as though the larger states are not favored at all and that they're kind of forgot about, it actually gives the smaller states a chance to get to know the candidates, whereas in a direct vote, the candidates might not get around to the smaller states just because they want to get the votes from all the larger ones. And then also, being in a large state, your vote still does count, even though it may not count the same way. It still has an impact on the election. And overall, I think that our country benefits from the Electoral College because it's an easier way to make the voting happen, and it's easier to fix if anything goes wrong.